Hi there, John Bruggeman here, talking to you today from the RSA conference. I'm your consulting CISO with CBTS, and I'm here today with Dan Woods from F5. Dan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, my name's Dan Woods. I'm the Global Head of Intelligence at F5. What that means is I work with a bunch of data scientists and engineers who pore over the roughly 2 billion transactions per day that kind of flow through the F5 security infrastructure. And we look for interesting insights. And then we share those insights with people like yourselves, audiences like yours, and at events like RSA.
All right. So from the standpoint of the average CISO who's looking to maybe leverage an F5 appliance, what would you recommend? I know this is a little different than what we were talking about. We were talking about your law enforcement background and how you investigate things. We'll get to that, I promise. But in terms of your solution from a CISO's perspective, the value proposition is F5 has great intelligence. Is that one of the values?
We certainly do have a lot of good intelligence because we have visibility into so many cyber attacks. And we don't just, mitigate the attack. We study the attacks, and we pull a lot of intelligence from our telemetry. All of our telemetry is kind of derived from what I call client-side signals. So we have JavaScript that executes inside web and mobile browsers, and we have an SDK that sits alongside the native apps. And the point of the SDK and the JavaScript is to collect a bunch of rich client-side signals that help many of our products make a decision as to whether or not the transaction is associated with something malicious or associated with a good customer. And if it's malicious, we take mitigating action. If it is associated with a good customer, we can take steps to reduce friction, like perhaps not force them to log in again.
Okay. We can talk about zero trust, but I know that's a different topic for a different group. So in the sense of the signal intelligence gathering, you've done some interesting investigations that might be interesting for the audience to hear about. So when you think about a recent investigation that the FBI conducted against Genesis, what were your insights that you took from that investigation?
I've been tracking Genesis for the last, 4 or 5 years since it first started. And I have to admit, I was blown away by Genesis. For those in the audience who don't know what it is a digital fingerprint marketplace. So not only are there usernames and passwords associated with victim machines, but the malware collects many of the same attributes used to generate browser fingerprints.
Yeah, which is how a lot of companies ease that friction for their customers, saying, I've fingerprinted your browser. We know that your browser is you, so we trust you. You don't have to get that push notification.
Exactly, and that was a problem for attackers. So now attackers can actually come from a replica of the victim's browser. So that was a huge, huge threat. And Genesis sells these, what they call bots.
Yeah, that's the way it was.
Misnomer.
Okay, because that's definitely the way it was interpreted by a lot of people, that, these are zombie computers that were going out and doing things.
Yeah, they're wrong. They're not really bots. It's kind of a misnomer. What they are is a collection of usernames, passwords, and many of the same attributes used to generate browser fingerprints.
Okay.
And each of their so-called bots is a collection of all of that for an infected machine.
Which gives it an identity of a sort.
It certainly does, yeah. In fact, I've purchased many of these so-called bots, and because the only way you can identify the true identity of the victim is to purchase the bot.
Sure, because then you get their username and their password,
exactly.
Probably their IP address, assuming it's sort of static.
You do, yep.
Yeah.
But the username is what you're able to key on and identify who the person is.
Okay.
Because oftentimes, you get access to, 100 of their accounts, and you have maybe 3 or 4 of their email addresses. You could pretty much determine who the true identity of the person. And then we've reached out to these victims and said, do you know your machine is infected?
Okay.
You've got malware on it. In fact, we know it was infected yesterday at 5. What were you doing yesterday at 5?
And what website did you go to?
Well, one person said he had downloaded a YouTube video converter, an EXE. At that time.
The old YouTube converters.
Yeah, exactly.
I do know that, yes.
Yes. Yeah, so it's been a huge problem. And every time I briefed a client on Genesis, they asked the same question. Why is this allowed to be up?
Yeah, why does it keep operating?
Because it wasn't only on the dark web, it was on the deep web. You could point your Chrome or Internet Explorer browser just to a URL for Genesis, and you'd be greeted with a login screen. So you didn't
it was a fully qualified domain name somewhere.
Exactly. You did not need Tor to access it.
Which makes sense from the criminal standpoint. It makes it bigger sales.
Absolutely, yes. So, everyone asks, why is it still up? And I know why. Let's have a theory as to why. When you executed a search at Genesis, it would take 45 seconds to a minute and a half to come back.
Okay.
What does that tell you? I mean, it isn't split second like a Google. It is going through cutout after cutout after cutout. You're not talking directly to the database. You're talking to a bent pipe that is talking to a bent pipe and so on. So that is quite that's quite a riddle to be solved, right? So the fact that FBI took it down eventually is an amazing accomplishment. The fact that, as a former agent, I know the challenges that they face trying to...
Do you mean legal challenges, or you just mean technical challenges, lack of resources?
Legal, technical, lack of cooperation between organizations. In fact, here's one that I've never heard anybody talk about, but it is a real challenge. As an investigator, if I issued a subpoena or some legal demand for...
Search warrant.
Well, yes, but I'm talking specifically about you send a demand for information to, say, an internet service provider, a telco, a bank, any company, and you ask for information. Maybe you're asking for all the metadata associated with an IP address, something like that. If you send out 100 of these demands, you're going to get the answer 100 different ways. Some will send you an email with a link to a place where you log in and download a CSV file. Okay. Others will send you banker's boxes full of printed paper that you have to sort through. Others will send you PDFs. Everything
almost as useless.
It is, yes. In fact, and then oftentimes there are entire pages missing from the PDFs.
Oh, wow.
Or they're out of order.
Yeah. Just with no page numbers.
Exactly. So you've got these 100 different enterprises sending you information in 100 different formats.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge.
No clearinghouse.
None at all.
Right. I mean, in one sense, it works in our favor because then you don't have a great firewall like they have in China. I mean, China could easily do that kind of digging without any problem whatsoever.
Yeah. So imagine the case agents at FBI who are sending out undoubtedly hundreds of these types of demands for information, all getting it differently, and then having to synthesize all of it and then issue another 100. And
to try and get more information.
It's an amazing accomplishment what they've done. And now, as I mentioned, as we were talking before we went live, they've taken down the deep web site, but the
Tor site.
The Tor site. Well, I don't know about now, but it was very, very recently. But I haven't checked it. That's going to be more difficult, I think, for them to take down. But hopefully they will.
Yeah, because we could go into a whole segue on Tor and how that operates, but that'll be a conversation for another day. We were also talking about how in the environment there are impediments to success. And you said that it's not really people or technology or money in one sense that's limiting the ability for CISOs to necessarily be successful.
Yeah, I think it's really a challenge that's leadership related. So it is people related. Okay. But at the top, not typically the rank and file. Okay. I can't tell you how many headquarters I have visited over the last 5 to 10 years. I've gone into so many headquarters buildings to meet with the security teams and the fraud teams. And as soon as you walk into one of these buildings, you're immediately hit with an impression. Sure. Sometimes, the colors are drab. There's no energy. Nobody's smiling. There aren't a lot of people there. It hasn't been remodeled or painted in a decade.
They're in the basement, almost literally or figuratively.
Yes. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you walk in and there's energy, there's good lighting, there's bright colors, their logo
Big
and their
monitors
brand is everywhere. And I'm telling you, when I see that difference, when I first walk into a headquarters building, that lack of energy or surplus of energy permeates the entire organization.
Okay.
It really does. I haven't even met the security team yet, but I've just walked.
You can make an impression.
Oh, I can walk into the headquarters lobby, and it's like emotionally draining. And then you go and you meet people, and you meet more people, and you realize, wow, this is not a recipe for success.
They may not be a happy team at all, in one sense.
And then there's the stovepipes. I see a lot of stovepipes.
Okay.
A quick
Siloed
example.
information.
Oh yeah, I went to one organization. We had taken care of all the bots, all the malicious bots, and we had identified what we believed was malicious humans, manual attackers. And I went
internal to the organization?
No, okay. External. And we wanted to bring it to the attention of the fraud team. So I went in and met with the security team and said, look, we found this manual fraud. We'd really like to get it in front of your fraud team. And I remember the person responded, F fraud. And,
whoa.
Yeah. And he spelled out the whole expletive.
Yes.
F fraud. And I was baffled. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I didn't know what to say.
Aren't we on the same team? Aren't we trying to accomplish the same goals?
I was speechless. So we weren't able to get it in front of the fraud team. But at the other end of the spectrum, same exact type of scenario. I went into the security team and I said to her, hey, we'd like to get in front of your fraud team. And she said, just a minute. And she picked up the phone and called the fraud team, and the fraud team walked in.
Wow.
That's the difference in the two bookends. And I see those sorts of challenges play out at virtually every organization I interact with.
So regardless of the vertical, whether it's banking or retail or healthcare or whatever, it does sound like it's actually the leadership of the security team, or do you think it has a function?
It's even higher.
Oh, it's higher than the security.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when everybody is proud to work at that enterprise, and I think that starts at the top.
Sure.
If
you're happy to go into work.
Oh yeah, yeah. So if you have all the money, all the tech, but you have unhappy people,
for some reason,
you're going to fail. Exactly, for some reason, then you're going to fail. But it starts with having happy, motivated,
energized
people. Exactly.
Interesting. So in terms of maybe in your career in law enforcement, you were able to see ways to motivate folks, or was it really, if I'm going to make up an example, let's say you worked for a police department and the chief of police was, excited and energetic, and that just, he made sure he hired the same kind of people, or do you think it was he just, or she, motivated people that way, or was it?
I think that, to me, the secret is hiring people who are actually better than you are.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah.
And I did. I mean, my team is filled with people who ask the question, God, he should be working for us. And when they say that, I go, good, I'm doing the right kind of hiring.
Okay.
And when I hire people and then somebody else, some other leader in the organization steals them, I'm not happy, but it's a compliment. It means that I'm hiring good people.
Right.
So to me, it's...
You got to have a certain level of comfort or confidence to be able to hire people that are brighter than you and go, I'm going to hire this guy. He might take my job, or I might not worry about losing my job.
That's right. Yeah, he or she might take my job, but you can't let that paralyze you. You can't. You need to.
If you want the organization to be good.
Exactly. You have to look out for the organization. It isn't about building a fiefdom for yourself. It's about doing what's best for the company. So I look for the people who can do circles around me technically, and hire them. And it's worked out well so far. And the other thing I see in inexperienced leaders is they're afraid to have an uncomfortable conversation.
A lot
you
of
know?
people are conflict avoidance.
Yes,
you
they
know,
are.
you know,
Yes, they are. They want to be nice. They want to be liked, and it's
and they
more
don't want to
important.
deliver bad news.
Yeah, it's more important to be trusted and respected. So there's going to reach you're going to reach a point. Any young, inexperienced leader is going to reach a point where they have to say something to somebody that they don't want to say, and they're going to put it off to the next meeting, and then they're going to put it off. They're going to put it off, and then it goes from an uncomfortable conversation to an even more uncomfortable conversation. It's kind of like seeing the dentist.
Yeah.
If you don't see the dentist for a long period of time, when you do, you're going to pay a dear price.
Oh, you don't
for it.
have one cavity, you have 5
Exactly,
cavities.
exactly. So it's important to just have that uncomfortable conversation and be completely honest with the person you're leading.
You can be diplomatic, but be honest.
Always be diplomatic and respectful and have empathy. You know,
Right.
that's a given.
But it can be forgotten. I mean, some people can think that they're being honest and not recognize that they're also being sort of blunt or potentially rude.
That's an excellent point. You don't want to confuse being direct and honest with being rude.
Right.
Yeah, direct, honest, and have empathy.
Yeah.
And be diplomatic.
Like, we know you spent a lot of time on this application, and we know that you were probably thinking about security as you designed the interface to make it easier for the customer to sign up. But you've made it too easy for the bots to sign up.